Yeah, welcome back to another episode of The Man, the Father, the Legend. I am your host, David Ford, and today we have a special guest, my man, Stephen Babcock, everyone. How you doing, man?
Hey, hey, how are you? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, man. Well, so first and foremost, can you just introduce yourself? Now, I know you and I know about your amazing gifts and talents, but just introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Totally. My name is Stephen Babcock. I'm a singer-songwriter who lives in upstate New York. I live in Buffalo, New York. I've been playing music for, the last 10 or 12 years or so. I've been touring around the country. It's actually how we met. I've been basically doing music for a long, long time. And outside of music, I love the Buffalo Bills and just all things sports. And I also have a twin brother, kind of a fun fact, but a little bit about me. That's kind of a little bit, quick, fun, interesting history about me, but mainly music, writing songs, playing shows. That's kind of my backstory, so to speak.
Awesome. Now he's being really modest because I met you through music and I had a chance to actually watch you perform and hear your incredible voice and your incredible gift of singing and songwriting. Man, you're amazing. Just
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm gonna put this story out really quick. When when I first met Steven, he came up to me. He was working. I was working at a show. He was performing. He came up to me. He was a really great guy, down to earth. Hey, how you doing? My name is Steven. Blah blah. I said, all right, cool. And something about your spirit. I was like, man, I gotta ask him to be a part of the podcast. So I said, nah, I'm not gonna do it. I just met him. There's no. Hey, I'm not gonna be that guy. And so the night goes on. He's performing his set. I'm like, man, his music is great. He performed one song in particular that just kind of really talked about being a husband and the challenges of being a husband and the difficulties that you have to and the difficult decisions that you have to face almost every day. And as soon as you started singing that song, I said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him." He's been super humble. Like he's a great singer and songwriter, but he's awesome. He has an awesome spirit, and he's super humble. I'm so happy that you are here. I'm going to ignore the Buffalo Bills comment. I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. So listen, I wanted to start by asking you, as a husband. First of all, congratulations. I saw that you just
Thank you.
recently, got married this past August, right?
Yep. I got married in August. I've been with my now wife. We'd been together for 5 or 6 years. And we were supposed to get married in 2020. But obviously COVID hit and kind of changed things. So we just moved it a year and then we finally got married and it was one of the best things I've ever done. It was really, really great experience. And I'm really lucky and very blessed. And I'm not sure everybody can say that about their partners, but I'm really happy that I can say that about mine. So yeah, I got married. Long story short, I got married in August.
Now tell us,
Yeah.
how did you guys meet?
So we met, and I think I told this story obviously when we met at the show that we were doing together. But basically, my wife was working at this thing called So Far Sounds, which is a series of house concerts, intimate kind of show events that are like a private event. You can sign up, get tickets, and go. And I was living in New York City at the time, and so was she. She was emceeing the event essentially. And I was supposed to not even play the night of the event, but they called me up and needed me to fill in for somebody who canceled. So I showed up. I started talking to my now wife, and I was like floored, like really, really into it. And I was really excited. So I started talking to her, and then I played my set for the show. And then when I got off the stage, she was gone. Apparently, she was like really sick and couldn't stay. And I didn't get her name. I didn't get her number. And I guess I knew her name was Lindsay, but I didn't know anything else about it and have any kind of way to contact her. And I was super bummed out. And then eventually, like a week later, she tagged me in a photo on Instagram. And like, long story short, we went on a date and then we just basically hit it off and we've been together ever since. It helps that she's also a Bills fan. But we basically met at the So Far Sound show and the rest is kind of history. Just kind of kismet, I guess, or kind of just luck of the draw. So it was exciting.
So when did you have that feeling that she was the one? Was it when you initially started having the conversation, or was it a little bit ways into dating?
I think it was Honestly, it was actually a really funny story. I haven't told this story much before, but there was a time where we were dating, I don't know, maybe like a month or so, maybe 2 months. And I was over at her house in New York, or her apartment, and we were hanging out, and she was like, she had a terrible like landlord in her apartment, always had never had hot water, always cold water. Heat never was on. It was always a problem.
Mm.
So one time she's on the phone, she calls up her landlord and just starts screaming at him and like getting really mad about it. And I remember, and it sounds like terrible, but it was so like, I don't know what it was, but there was like a switch that went off, and I was like, I think I'm in love with this woman. Like, I just love her. She's just so, like, she was just always so, she is so, spunky and kind of, everything that I'm not, in a lot of ways, and everything that I am. And we're very similar, and we're also very different. But just, I don't know what it was. It's like, it wasn't that she was calling her landlord and yelling at the landlord that I fell in love with, but we were just like standing out in front of her apartment. And I was just like, wow, I could see myself spending the rest of my life with this person. I just think she's the best thing ever. And I don't know why it happened in that moment. I couldn't tell you why, but that is the moment that I knew. And I told her that. And then, obviously we're married, but we kind of, it went from there, and it just kind of kept rolling. And I can't imagine spending a day without her, really. So that's kind of where that.
Yeah. So I'm really curious. Have you always, as you were growing up, have you always been interested in actually being married?
Yeah, yes. I've always kind of been a hopeless romantic. I think that's kind of why, I became a songwriter, I think, in a lot of ways. But I'm also really blessed, because I think I always knew I wanted to get married, just because my parents are still married to this day. I forget what anniversary they're on, but it's definitely quite a few up there in the numbers. And, they've always been a great, role model for what marriage can look like through the years. They had 3 kids, 4 kids if you count my sister's adopted, but 4 of us total. But my mother birthed 3 of us, and they stayed together and worked through all that, and moves and jobs and different things in life. And so that was always a really nice, role model, the 2 of them, for me, and having what married life looks like. And so I always knew I wanted that. And then I think, I've always kind of been hopeless, like I said, a hopeless romantic, and looking for love, a long-term kind of situation. And when I found it, like, it was really freeing, and really like, it just kind of it does complete you, I think, in a way. It completed me in a way, for sure.
Wow, wow, wow. That's amazing, because I felt the same way about, my wife. When I said, man, I can't
It's
imagine
like,
not being with you.
yeah. And I mean, like, for you, like, doesn't it feel like when you meet that person, like, it completes you in a way that, like, it kind of fulfills a need, or an emptiness you didn't even really know that you had. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's in that. I was telling her the other day. I said, what's awesome about it is whenever you're up, I may be down, or whenever I'm up, you may be down, but we always find a way to balance each other out and pull each
Yeah.
other when we really need it the most. I think that's like the most important thing about marriage that not a lot of people are experiencing, like, today. So that's great. So
Yeah.
so as you're growing up, right, and you have multiple siblings, and you witness your parents and different things kind of transpiring as you're growing up and you're becoming more mature and stuff like that. What experiences did you have, or kind of what exposure did you have into your father being the father and handling his responsibilities? What exposures and experience did you have with that made you say, hey, I want to fill those roles one day?
I think the big thing for me, is, maybe it's old fashioned, or maybe it's not, I don't know. But my dad kind of always took care of us, right? Like, my family was very, and there's nothing wrong with however your family looks, or anybody's family looks, but my family just tended to be very traditional. My mom had a job before she had, or right as she had kids, but basically once I was like 3 years old, and my older brother was like, 6, 7 years old, she stopped working and was a stay-at-home mom, which is a huge job in its own right. But my dad was the one that went to work every day, and like, he was the provider. So for me, that was always, something I always took away from seeing him, go to work every day and come home and be excited to be home with us after working all day. You know what I mean? And like now I think about that, like I don't even have kids yet, but there are days when I work and I don't want to see anybody when I'm done. You know what I mean? My dad was coming home every day and wrestling around with 3 boys and a girl. I mean, like we were always having a good time. And so we were always just, that's where I think I get a lot from my dad in that way, or what I saw from him was the ability to be a family man and a provider, but also at the same time, which I think is really important. And I was thinking about this just the other day, but had his own interests in his own life as well. Like he loves to golf and he loves to he has other activities that he likes to do, so that he was doing all of these things, working, taking care of a family, and then also had his own interests. And I think that's really important too. And that was kind of a huge takeaway for me as I've gotten married, as I want to have a family in the future, having your own life, a family life, having a work life, all of those things blending together to become, what I think is like a man of quality and substance, in the world.
So how did he react when you told him that you wanted to propose to your girlfriend at the time?
I think my dad likes my wife more than he likes me, honestly, at this point. So I think he was like, great. You should do that, before she gets on out of there. No, I think my family was really excited. It's funny. I'm the youngest boy in the family. And so I was and I'm the last one to get married of my 2 brothers. I have a twin brother who's a few minutes older than I am, and an older brother, and they both got married before I did. So now that when my time came along, and I think my brothers thought that I was the first one that was going to get married, but I actually was the last one. And I think because I was just waiting for the right fit, and I found the right fit. And I think everybody knew that. And I think my dad was really excited. My parents were really excited. My whole family was really excited. Everyone loves Lindsay. And I'm, it was an easy, like, hey, I'm going to do this. And everyone was like, yeah, that sounds great. You know what I mean? It was very simple for sure.
Now we unfortunately live in this era where a lot of kids our age, not kids, but a lot of people, young adults our age, maybe not be interested in marriage, may have experienced something bad in marriage. Have you ever witnessed that, or kind of saw like maybe a celebrity couple get divorced and make you think, maybe this shouldn't happen, or maybe I could just be in a relationship with this person for a long time? Or was that just kind of never really a factor?
I mean, for me, it was never really a factor, but I can see the thing is that even though for me it wasn't really a factor, I have a lot of friends who have dated people for years and years and years and have no interest in getting married, or people that I know who've been married have no interest in having kids. And I think everybody's journey is different, and that's the benefit of life, and kind of the craziness of it as well, is that you get all these different like viewpoints on things. But I think I don't think I was ever like, oh, I'm not going to get married, or that wasn't an interest thing to me. I think for me, the only reason I wouldn't have got married is if I felt like I never found the right person. I think a lot of times I think what I've learned or gathered from people who maybe have been married and got divorced, or have, obviously I've been in relationships and broke up, is that you think you found the right person and you really didn't, or you're shooting the gun too fast. You're jumping the gun, I guess is the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're not sussing out some of those important details that you need to before you get married, or before you kind of like hunker down into it. Because my experience with marriage has been, I mean, everyone has their ups and downs, and life is never perfect, but it's been overall like a 10 out of 10 success. I don't feel like I have no regrets about it. And I think sometimes I know people who've got married. I was talking to a buddy of mine who got married recently, or he got married a few years ago, but I was talking to him recently, and he was, he and his wife are going through certain things. And I think a lot of that comes from not knowing each other really, really well, not knowing who each other is before you come together and get married. And so now there's like there a rift occurs because you don't really know the person you put a ring on, and that can be dicey. So, but for me personally, it's never really been a factor.
So how long did it take for you to feel that comfort level with knowing who your wife was before you even proposed to her?
I think I knew I think, like I said earlier, I knew I kind of loved this person pretty quick. I think loving somebody and then getting married to them is a different
Right.
journey entirely. And I think for me, it was probably a few years. I would say probably 2 to 3 years before I was like, wow, we're definitely going to get like, and sometimes you date you date people and you think, oh, I love this person. We're going to get married. And you just kind of talk like that. But when there's a difference between that and actually doing the deed, so to speak. And 2 to 3 years in, I think I knew I was like at a mental space, maturity level, or just life space where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I mean, I think the easy answer there is like, oh, people say, well, no, you can't be with anybody else. Like, you're just going to be with this one person forever. And I think that to me never bothered me. Like, I thought, well, if I find the perfect person, why would I want to be with anybody else? I don't, what am I like? I never was also the kind of guy that felt like I had to like run around the town. Like, that just wasn't who I was to begin with. But especially when I was ready to get married, I was like, well, I found everything that I want. Why would I don't need to get greedy. I don't need to be out here like double dipping. That was not what I wanted to be doing. So, but I think knowing you want to get married, like the actual like being ready for that life moment, probably took a few years. But then once it happens, you kind of accept it, and it's kind of like just growing up. You know what I mean? It's like accepting change in your life, like knowing you're no longer a teenager, now you're an adult, and knowing you're an adult and now you're like actually like a real like adult with children and a family, and you have responsibilities. Like all those life moments that move along the kind of train tracks of life, you eventually come and learn. I found that you just kind of learn to accept the growth and move forward. That's the key. I just kind of at a certain point, a few years into the relationship, accepted that growth, knew where my relationship was, and was comfortable to move that train forward.
I like that. Accept the growth.
Yeah.
I like that. I gotta
Yeah.
I gotta coin that phrase. That's nice. All right, so we in the process before now, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about after you were married, but I'm really interested in before getting married. Were there
Sure.
did you have like a list of like deal breakers, like absolutely no, that I will not bend, I will not fold on this if this quality or this characteristic or if this thing shows up, or was it more just like, hey, whatever I kind of feel?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's definitely to point B, you do kind of have to feel it, right? Like you can always have moments in yourself or things in yourself that you're like, well, I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that, or I do want to have this. But I think also sometimes you have those rules in place and then you meet just a person that just hits right. And you're just like, well, that's what I want that. And and the things I was so tough on, I can kind of shake and change.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the deal breakers, though, if there were any, were really just about I wanted someone who had a sense of humor, who could take a joke. I'm like a real jokey, kind of hokey guy. Sometimes cheesy guy. I needed somebody who could understand and be funny and kind of not necessarily be a comedian, but just like that could be fun. I'd never wanted to be with somebody that was so stiff and boring and kind of very like stuck in their ways.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm stubborn, so I never wanted to be with someone who was also stubborn, because I've been with people like that. And you just clash all the time. And luckily, my wife's a lot less stubborn than I am. Um, and I think also, just being with somebody who understood me, that was really key. I don't think I knew that until I was a little older, and that's kind of amorphous. It's like a weird thing to say as a deal breaker, like, of course, but of course you want them to understand you, but there's like a nuance to that. And that it's kind of like a key meeting a lock. Like it's kind of, you think people understand you until they really get you.
Mm-hmm.
And like that happens in moments of crisis or like in an emotional moment, where you're really feeling something away. And like when people react in the way you kind of need them to, that's like a deal breaker for me. Sometimes people in moments of crisis don't necessarily react in the way you kind of need them to.
Yeah.
Just because that's how people are. And they're not even like they're negative or somebody's bad or good. It's just like, because it isn't a good or a bad. It's more like if your expectations are this or that, and they don't kind of line up with that, then that's one of those things like later down the line could build and be negative.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that was important. And I think also the obvious is that as a musician, as a guy who's always on the road, who's always playing shows, I needed to be with somebody who could understand that and knew that that was my first love, my first passion,
Mhm.
that, it doesn't supersede being married or being with somebody, but it is so important and integral to who I am. Kind of goes into hand to hand with understanding who I am as an individual.
Right.
That was really well. So all of those things, but there is a flow to it. And, sometimes like you meet the right person and it just clicks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now you get through all of this, you pop the big question, you
Mhm.
get to the wedding ceremony. And listen, I went through your Instagram page and I said, man, these are some beautiful photos. And
Thank you very much.
you did a concert at your wedding?
Uh, I played I played two songs at my wedding, and I kind of, so I felt very, very divisive about this because the thing is that, um, I did not want to play at my own wedding. I thought that would be too cheesy, maybe, or too like over. And then mother-in-law was like, I really think you should play a song at your wedding. And she was like very persistent about it. And then Lindsay, my wife, was like, you really should, I think it'd be fun. I think you'll like not regret it. And so I did it. And it was one of the coolest things I think it was probably one of my favorite parts of the wedding. I actually admit that I was absolutely wrong. It was actually a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Um, it's a little bit, it's ironic because as a musician, you play in front of people and you want people to like listen to your music and know who you are. But like on my wedding day, I almost didn't want the spotlight like that. I kind of wanted it, like I felt like my wedding day should be about her and I, not just like, hey, here's me playing a song. Like it just felt too like indulgent, and I was like, I don't want to. But it ended up being cool, and I was actually really glad I did it, and I'm glad we have photos of it. But yeah, yeah, I don't. I sometimes I still feel mixed about that, but I'm glad it happened for sure.
Yeah. Wait, I'm sure you were nervous.
Oh, I mean, are you kidding me? Dude, it was like I've played so many shows in my whole life, and I've been playing music for like over 10 years. That was the most intense show experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
I practiced the song, the one of the first songs I played with the band we had for the reception. So I had like most people practice a dance, they do like a couple's dance and stuff. Like I practiced this song to play for the reception. And my in-laws are there, my parents are there, all my family's there, our friends. Like some people who, they know that I play music, but they've never seen me like play a show or anything.
Yeah.
And so that was very like, here we go, it was very intense.
Yeah.
But we did it through, it was a good time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It looked really fun. I said, man, I wish I knew him, knew him then so I could get invited. It looked really, really cool. So you said your I do's, you guys go and you're moving on to this next chapter. When did it hit you that, yo, I'm actually really married?
It's really funny that you asked that because I don't know if I've ever really had that. If I had that, I mean, I've had that moment. I think I get that moment in fits and starts. Like sometimes I'll just be like on the couch, like, "Oh, I'm married. Like this is my wife." But we've lived together for a long time when we lived in New York, and then obviously we moved. We live in Buffalo now, and we have a house together, and we've lived in this house for 2 years. Like, and I think we were already supposed to be married in 2020, and then it got canceled and rescheduled. So in a way, I almost kind of missed that moment of like, oh, I'm married. Like it didn't really hit me until it doesn't really hit me even now actually until like little things that come up.
Mhm,
Like if I'm filling out like paperwork and
mhm,
it's like, oh, this is my wife. Like I'm like, and I'm so often I was so used to like, you go to the doctor and it's like, are you single or are you married? And
yeah,
it's like when I was, dating, you're just right single. But then it's like, oh, I'm married. I'm married now. Like it's just like a different, and it's like you wake up and you got like a ring on your finger and you're like, oh, like I gotta think like this is a rubber ring. I use it because I go to the gym and lift
mhm.
weights. But I had to think like, oh, I need a rubber ring because I'm married and I don't want to wear my gold ring to the gym because I don't want to scratch it up. And it's like those things, those are when I think, oh, I'm married. But like it's funny, there was never like a big fireworks in the air, like explosion. Holy smokes, I'm married. It just kind of always kind of finds its way into my day-to-day life, which I think is kind of good in a way. I kind of like it that way.
Right, right, right. So you said that you guys were living together before you guys got married?
Yes, that's correct.
You kind of had an opportunity to learn her, and she had an opportunity to learn you. Kind of sees the ugly side of each other before
Yes.
really kind of. Now, how do you think that benefited or kind of helped you guys out with in your marriage?
I think it was invaluable. I don't I and I commend everybody, people who don't do that. There's no harm. I'm not judging anybody, religious beliefs or how people want to live their lives. There's nothing wrong with either option, or any option. But I really liked the fact that we got to live together for about 2 years before we left New York, and then we moved to our current house. But when we left to move up to Buffalo, we were already engaged. So at that point, but we were dating and we were living together for 2 years, and that was invaluable because I think that's where you get to know somebody, is on the day-to-day, the micro level. I think if we were just going on dates and seeing each other like here and there and trying to see what that was like, I think it wouldn't have been enough to know. And for me, it gave me confidence when I was ready to propose. Like, I know who this person is. There's no secrets here. Like, I know what they do and who they are and what they're like on a day-to-day level, which is essential, I think, before you get married, because you're going to be spending every day with this person. So to me, that was valuable. But for some people, they don't necessarily feel like they need that. But I definitely was happy to have that. That was really important to me.
Now, while you were living together and even after you guys said your I do's, what did you learn about yourself that you probably didn't know prior to living with her and prior to getting married?
I needed to be more patient. I needed to learn patience. That definitely come through. I think I learned I as an individual was more stubborn than even I thought I was. That was in those faults, I tried to learn how to better myself. And I also just think I learned in a positive sense, learned that this person was like my best friend. You know what I mean? This person was, which I don't know if I would have learned that just by going on dates with somebody. I mean, you get to like this person and know them and love them, but you learn that. I think by living with them, I learned this is my best friend. Like, I didn't want to do anything else but spend time with this person. So that was huge as well. But you take the bad and you try to learn, and that was helpful because you have another person who's looking at you every day saying, here's what's great about you and here's what you can fix, and not in a negative way, like pointing out your flaws, but being like, you do this and it's bad, let's change it. And I credit her with as much maturity growth as I do with my own self. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the maturity and the growth that I have as an individual stems from being around her and her looking at me truthfully and saying, this is off. We got to fix this for you. But out of a general sense of positivity for the both of us, it benefits both of us, not just me, but it also benefits our life together. So those are some of the things I think I learned living with her, before we got married.
Now that's awesome, and it's really interesting that you say that. Now, I'm really interested in, how did you get to the point where you were comfortable actually hearing some of the flaws that you have from someone else?
I don't even know if I am comfortable with it now. I think what it comes down to is just eventually, you start to learn that this is a person I found that this is a person I can trust, and that eventually, when you talk to somebody enough, and I think this is true not just in marriage but even with friends and things, is you start to know someone well enough that I think with the stages of when you meet somebody, you're kind of cordial and you're friends, and this could be friendship or dating, but you meet somebody, you start to know them, you're nice, and then you start to kind of chip away, and you can say some things that are maybe a little edgy that might not necessarily you'd want to say on a first date, but you would say when you know somebody. And eventually, when those things start coming in and you start to think about those things, that hey, maybe don't be so this or don't be so that, because it comes off like this. And instead of going, well, I think you're wrong, you kind of go, let me think on that. And then you start to chew on it and you're like, maybe they're right, and that's the kind of the growth of it. And that's when you kind of I started to take a lot of that in stride more and more as we were dating. I mean, and again, after months of being with somebody, I just kind of took that into myself and just kind of learned from that. And that was super huge as well. But it wasn't an immediate thing. It kind of still, even now, sometimes people, she'll say something like, I don't like, you should do this or don't do that. And it's kind of well, you don't understand. But then it's you think about it later, you're taking a shower, you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, maybe they were right about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and the way I see life, particularly married life, but I would say all life, is just being open to change is an incredibly important thing that I struggle with, but I always try to keep in my pocket, because life is ever changing, and if you're just kind of stuck in one way, you're just going to be left behind. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And to be honest with you, that's one of the biggest areas that I'm struggling with. Because even like literally right before we got on this call, my wife and I are having a conversation, and I'm like, "You don't understand. Like, just look at it from my eyes, look at it from my
Sure.
perspective, and stop
Sure.
looking at how you're looking at it." And she's like, "No, you need to look at it how I'm looking at it because blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Why is it so hard for me to hear this criticism from you?" Right?
Yeah.
I think for marriage so far, the biggest lesson I've learned is that self-reflection piece, right? When
Mhm.
you realize, oh, maybe I don't wash the dishes as much as I think I did. Like,
Exactly. And there's listen, and I also think too, sometimes people can be wrong. Sometimes your wife can be wrong, and sometimes you can be wrong. And you're like knowing where to stand your ground and knowing where to say, like, I'm gonna let that go is
mhm,
huge. And like, if I'm not saying that, hey, keep the receipts, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying you got to remember everything that you did or everything that somebody else did for you or didn't do or whatever, but it is one of those things that you kind of, if somebody gives you criticism, your wife criticizes you about doing something, or says you should change this or try that or whatever, if you think about it, and if the criticism is fair, you'll probably come to that conclusion and understand that. And
mhm.
I think if that's a good marriage, in my opinion, like, because if you can look at yourself and go, well, they were actually kind of right. And then if they were actually kind of wrong, you can look at yourself and say, listen, I don't think they were really that right. And then you can go back.
Right, right,
But,
right.
you know, any good marriage, in my opinion, um, I've seen it with my parents. Obviously, I've not been married that long, but I've been in a relationship for a long time,
Mhm.
is knowing when the person says something and they're probably right. And
Yeah,
when they're wrong, knowing that you can go back with confidence and say, I don't think that that was really how it meant to be or should have been, that type of thing.
that's big. That's big.
Yeah.
I'm still learning that. I think we've come a long way, especially since when we first got married. But man, it's definitely help. You're definitely helping me out a lot. So I want to kind of
Well,
go ahead.
I'm happy to help. I'm learning from you. I mean, I think like the fact, you have a kid, like that to me is a huge hurdle to come over. And, you know, to be married and have children, it's like that's a huge leap. So I think, if anything, I'm learning from you more than you learn from me. You know what I mean?
Come on now. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Are you? Do you want kids? Do you guys want to have kids?
As far as I know, yeah. But yes, I'm just joking. But yeah, we do. And I want to have kids. I know she wants to have kids. And I think it's just a matter of getting the timing right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know, uh, we both have careers. Mine is music related. Hers is she works in a makeup company, but it's a job that she really loves. So it's just about finding the timing and getting that right. And so we're just kind of starting that journey. We obviously just got married only a few months ago. So, but I definitely foresee that in our future for sure.
Do you have any fears or nervousness about becoming a father?
I think probably all the classics, just making sure that you're a good dad and that you're a good person and that I think, it's easy to say that you feel like you're growing and moving forward as an adult person, as an adult man or woman or whatever. But until you have like a little child in your hands, like that's yours, like that, I think that that's a different level of, I mean, yeah, I'm sure, but that to me seems like a whole different, mountain to climb. And my older brother has a kid, a beautiful boy, and he's lovely. But I can see the challenges that also possesses,
Mhm.
as well as the joy. But there's also challenges there, and having a kid. And I just think like when just you always want to make sure that you're ready for it. And I don't know, it's learning when you're going to be ready for it. That's what's kind of scares me a little bit. But I'm willing and ready to hop on the roller coaster and take the ride. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely a roller coaster, but I think you have a great mindset because you talked about kind of adjusting and just taking the growth every day, as life changes and how, whatever
mhm.
comes your way. And that's what having a kid is like. Like literally, I'll give you an example. We've been trying to perfect the sleep schedule forever. And it seems like every
Okay.
single time we get a sleep schedule for Junior, he switches it up like 2 days
Sure.
later. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Listen,
yo.
that to me, I also thought, oh man, I'm not like a crazy sleep. I can't imagine, I thought like I don't really need that much sleep, but everybody I know that has a kid and they're dealing with that, the sleep schedule stuff, like they're just like, man, I got like 2 hours of sleep last night just dealing with this, like setting this up. And like, I'm exhausted. Like I thought I knew exhaustion. And I realized I have no idea what exhaustion is. You know what I mean?
Listen,
So,
listen, my biggest piece of advice is support your wife. Like,
amen. There
really,
you go.
because she will need it. She may not vocalize it, but she'll need it. Support
Sure.
her in every way imaginable. That's one of the biggest things I learned, because I'm a musician. I help out people all the time, and so there were some days that I didn't realize until afterwards. It was like she was okay with me leaving, so that she said, but really she really needed somebody there with her. And every time I left to go out the door, it was like kind of like I was leaving her side, and that kind of killed me. Which is an awesome transition, because the one song that you had that dude, when I tell you, I've listened to that song just about every day since I've heard it. Literally, I'm gonna say at least 8 times a day since I've heard it. I've listened to this song. You had one line when you said, "I'm always out the door," and
Yeah.
that really kind of hit me, because a lot of times we don't talk about, as fathers and as husbands, we don't talk about how we have to balance our responsibilities with our roles as parent and husband.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, and what is your experience trying to pursue the music career, do your work, but also be there as a husband?
I think the biggest thing is communication, right? I think it starts there, and I think it in a way it even ends there. But I think it's being upfront about here's what I've got going on, here's what I'm doing, here's where I'm going, here's what I got, like, and being very upfront and open about that from the jump. Is very important. I have a calendar. We have a calendar in our house that's like for both of us to use for general stuff and like stuff that we've got appointments, things like that. That's always filled up with show dates and everything. That here's where I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be gone. Just so there's expectations are set, in a very reasonable way. And then that way, if there's changes, we can, it's understandable because, well, here's what we expected. And then there's a slight change. Okay, this is fine. This is good. I think, it's always hard because, I never want to be away too long. And eventually when you go away, and I love being on the road. I love playing shows. I love meeting people. It's a huge part of what brings me joy. And again, I think that circles back to kind of what I was saying even earlier about, having your own life and things that bring you joy outside of just your marriage and your family, because I think that makes you a rounded individual and makes you a better human for the world. But, even then, being away all the time, it makes me miss being home. And so I always try to just mix it in. I always try to be very intentional about telling my wife when I'm here, when I'm gone, with whatever things look like. And then also making sure that we spend quality time together, that when I come home, I'm home, and that, during the day, I might be working on something in my office, working on songs or working on an email or whatever. But at night, or whatever time we allot for it, we go and, we have dinner together, or we go out to the movies, or we just hang out at the house together and just put a fire on the fireplace and just watch TV. Like whatever that looks like, I always try to really be very intentional about that. Just about being intentional in everything you do. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of where that stems from, whether that's, I think about it that, whether it's my job and music or if it's my marriage, like I just want to be intentional about what I want and where I want to go with it and what I want to do with it. And then everybody's pleased with that. Then there's no reason to be upset,
Yeah. Now, has it ever been a time where you guys carved out time to be with one another, but something came up that could have led to an opportunity in music or something like that, and you had to really say, babe, I'm sorry, but I have to go do this?
Yeah, that definitely, some of that stuff has definitely happened. There was actually a time, I think, what was it? We were supposed to go to a friend's wedding, and we were traveling to go to the wedding, and a show came up, like a big festival show that I had to play. And I think that we just kind of compromised on it. Like I was like, all right, great. So I'm gonna miss the wedding ceremony in the church, but I'll be there at the reception. Like, let me go do the show. I'll finish that up, wrap it up, and then I'll go to the reception and be with you for the rest of the night. And just finding like compromises there. I think it depends on the those things come up very, very infrequently, and not very often at all. But when they have, we always try to just find a solution together. And I never say I'm going to do this and this is the final answer. It's like, I'm going to do this. Is that all right? Is that good? And then again, that communication and being aware of it and just moving forward from there. And I, at the end of the day, music is kind of like the number one thing in my life at this moment, because we don't have kids or anything. And so like Lindsay and I are very open about me doing music, and it's very good. Like, that's where it is. But then I think, and even I know this, if I'm honest with myself, like when we have a family, those things will change a little bit and the dynamics are going to have to shift. So it's just about timing and where we are right now in our lives versus where we might be in a few years, and just being aware of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a huge struggle point for me. That time, because I'm an educator, started businesses, got the podcast, musician. Then before I got married, I was the guy that everyone called. At least it seemed like everyone called for something. Whether hey, I need help with this. I need you. Can you do this for me? Can you do this? So having to kind of now prioritize it and say, all right, listen, this is family time. This is time with my wife. This is, that has been really, really difficult.
And I don't think it ever gets easier. You know what I mean? I don't think it's something that anybody ever really figures out. But I think you kind of just find a routine, like your sleep schedule for your kid. It's like you kind of find a situation that works, and you kind of hope that continues to work, and you keep pushing that until it doesn't. And then you just change it and adjust. That's just life as a whole. It's just planning and adjusting. So I get that.
Yeah, I feel that. Now, when as you're getting married, not as you're getting married, but you've gotten married and things like that, have you ever had to encounter a friend who maybe you thought was kind of like doing a little bit too much in terms of like trying to ask you to do stuff that take you away from your wife?
I can't say that I have, but per se, like I don't think I've. The thing, only because I think by the time I was getting married, a lot of my friends aren't necessarily married, but they've kind of moved into their own like trajectories in life. I think that in its own way was kind of a strange thing to deal with, not necessarily because people moved on with their life, but and did like their own things. And they're still my great friends, and I have friends now because we all lived in New York City together. Then everybody kind of spread out across the country, California and Nashville and other parts of New York and Texas and whatever. That was more of a challenge. It's like learning. That was like closing that book on being a young person and like opening the adulthood book. But I can't say that I've necessarily had an issue with friends maybe like asking me to be doing too much or taking me away from the house. The only thing that happens there is my own desires to do more sometimes will take me away from the house. But I have to just like learn when to say, like, maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe that's not going to move the needle for what I think it's going to do, and kind of like coming to terms with that.
Awesome, man. You've shown me a lot, and even though you just got married, you still have a lot of wisdom, and you know a lot.
Well, thanks. I'm just kind of figuring it out one day at a time, like everybody else.
Yeah, man. Listen, you figured it. You're figuring it out all right. So I only have a few more questions. Listen,
Sure.
Who do you go to when you really go through something, in your marriage, and you're like, I really need some advice? Who is that one person that you go to, and why do you go to that person?
I probably would go to there's probably two friends of mine that I probably call up. Mainly just because I feel like I can be very honest and open with them and very vocal with them. And that's really important. Ironically, they're both not married, but they both, I think, know me really well. And so which I think almost matters more than being married. And I also know that if I told them something, they wouldn't tell everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, Luckily, I haven't really had that problem, in my life occur where I've really felt like I needed to talk to somebody outside of my own wife. But
Mhm.
there's probably two friends of mine that, and they ironically don't live anywhere near where I live now. But thanks to the internet and phones, it makes it so much easier. But
Yeah.
I call them first before I call them, because I feel like that's where I could turn and be open and honest and know that I get a good answer, that advice that I probably would use and take, which is helpful.
Right. That's awesome. Awesome. Listen, I have one last question. One last question. If you were talking, let's picture you talking to someone who was considering getting married, or maybe they just proposed and they're journeying into their wedding day and living this marriage life. What advice would you give that person?
I would say, I guess maybe there's probably a lot of things I could say. I'm sure you know that. There's probably a lot of things that could be said. I would say, before you make that leap, uh, make sure that's what you want.
Mm.
I think people take marriage lightly, or they think it's like a thing to do. And it's like, it's not like, getting cheeseburgers for lunch. Like, it's a big choice for your life. So be certain that's what you want. And I think B, at least in my experience, and this is what I would say, is that person your best friend, or like one of your best friends?
Mm.
If they're not, then that probably would be maybe that's not the right choice for you right now. That I think people always said that to me. Oh, I married my best friend, or I'm going to marry my best friend, or this is, you should marry your best friend. And I was like, yeah, sure, like, cool. And then I got married, and I was like, I did that. And you don't even know you're doing that until you really think about it. But, it's just the way that it is, that this person's going to be, because this person's going to be with you and in your life forever until you're like literally dead and gone. So, it's like, and even then after, I mean, I'm a Catholic man, so I believe on it on a whole extra level, but we won't get into that. But like, you know what I mean? Like, this person's in your life forever. So like, you want to make sure that the person you're tying your wagon to, is worth doing that. I think that my advice would be those two things. And I think finally it would just be open to change. Be open to change is probably the biggest thing. My wife, I mean, not only has she changed me in, a very personal, like, human growth way, but like, I mean, she's always trying to change the carpet in the living room. And I'm just like, do we need to do this again? But all jokes aside, like, everything's always going to change when you introduce somebody else into your life. When you're just the only one in your kind of world, it's very easy because you can just kind of do things that you want, and you're not worried about what other people have to say or think or whatever. But when you live with somebody else and you get married, like, things are going to change all the time. And I think, I'm sure, and you could speak to this too, but once you have kids, it's going to change even more. And so those are the three probably things I would say, is make sure that this is what you want to do. Make sure you're marrying your best friend, or somebody you would call your best friend, and be ready for change, because everything's going to change, in a big way, in a small way, and in ways you might not like, and in ways you're probably going to love. More often, ways you're going to love, and you probably don't even know it yet. So those are probably the three main things I would say to somebody who's about to get married.
That is awesome. Well, Stephen, listen, I feel the love you have for your wife. Like, I
Thank you.
feel it through the camera. So please give your wife my love.
I, I
you,
will.
you guys are definitely an example for all of our younger people who are considering marriage. I appreciate your time, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking me a bunch of questions and letting me talk for too long. So I appreciate it.
Dude, listen, you can talk longer, man. I'm a talker, so we can do this all night.
I appreciate Thanks for having me on, man. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. Listen, guys, thank you for watching another and listening to another episode of the Man and Father Legend. Please make sure that you are following us on social media at Man Father Legend on Facebook and on Instagram. We will be back with another episode very shortly. Thank you, guys.